Hello and welcome to the Music Theory Guy Clinic with me, Music Theory Guy. If you've got a question about music theory, this is the place to get it answered. If you'd like to get in touch, you can send me an email or you can contact me via Facebook or Twitter. Now that's precisely what Matthew Scarpelli has done. He's written to me and he wants to know about dynamics. So let's have a look. Okay, so here's a very simple piece of music. We've got a flute and an oboe. The flute is playing all the notes on the top line and the oboe is playing all the notes on the bottom line. Now, as you can see, and I've highlighted them red, these are the dynamics. They tell the flautist or the oboist how loud or quiet to play the notes. So let's have a look at how loud or quiet each of those symbols mean. So here's a sliding scale. I'm going to put the loudest dynamics at the top and the quietest at the bottom. Here's an F, here's a double F, and here's a triple F. Now they're at the loudest end of our sliding scale. The F is short for forte, which means loud. FF means fortissimo, which means play very loud. Now normally you would only come across forte or fortissimo, but occasionally you come across this triple F, and that means fortissimo, which means very, very loud. Now theoretically you could keep adding Fs, as many as you like, meaning get even louder and louder and louder, but generally we stick to just 1, 2, very rarely 3 Fs. So just be aware that you can come across more than 3 Fs. At the opposite end of the scale, towards our quietest end, we come across P, PP, and PPP. Now the P stands for piano, which means soft. PP is pianissimo, which is very soft, and PPP is pianissimo, which means very, very soft. And again, you could add more P's at this end of the scale if you wanted to, but generally we just have P, PP, or PPP. In the middle of our scale, we get F's and P's, but there's an M that's placed directly next to it. That M stands for mezzo, which translates to medium, or literally half. So MF means mezzo forte, which means medium loud, and MP stands for mezzo piano, which means medium soft. Let's pop all of those dynamics at the bottom of our screen so we can make reference to them. And let's have another look at that music I showed you a moment ago for the flute and for the oboe. And what we're going to do, we're going to focus in on the oboe part. So as you can see, the very first note of the oboe, underneath it, there is the symbol MF, which we just came across, meaning mezzo forte. And over here, we've got a symbol piano. Now be aware that that instruction MF, mezzo forte, although it's sitting directly underneath the note C, it doesn't mean that that C is played MF and all the other notes after it are played at a different dynamic. That instruction for MF is applicable and applies to all other notes until we get to the next instruction, in this case piano. And then the notes from that point are all played piano. So in other words, these red notes are all played mezzo forte, but as soon as we get to the blue note, the C, because that's marked piano, all of the notes from that point on are also played piano. So this time let's have a look at the flute part. We can see that the very first note, which I've highlighted red, is MF. So that first note is played mezzo forte. But immediately after that we come across this symbol. Now this symbol means crescendo, which means gradually getting louder. So as the flautist plays B, C, and then D, he or she is going to get slightly louder, gradually get louder as they play those 3 notes until they get to the next note, which is the E, which is marked as forte, at which point they stay playing forte for that entire measure or bar. Now just be aware that there's also a symbol that looks very similar to crescendo, and it looks like this. It's the exact opposite of that symbol, and it means gradually getting softer. That's called a decrescendo or a diminuendo. And be aware that sometimes you don't even see those symbols. They're replaced with cresce for crescendo, or decresce or dim for decrescendo or diminuendo. So I'm just going to pop those symbols at the bottom of our screen. And whilst we're looking at crescendo and decrescendo or diminuendo, it's worth pointing out that it doesn't matter how far away the ends of those symbols are. I often see students writing them very, very far apart, like this example on the right. How far apart they are, the ends of them, makes no difference to how loud or quiet the music gets. What is important is that you remember the difference between the crescendo symbol and the decrescendo symbol. So crescendo, the opening is on the right, and decrescendo, the opening is on the left. So looking back at our music, we got as far as the first note of the second bar or measure, and that E is played forte, as are all of the notes in that bar or measure, because there's no other symbol or dynamic to tell us to change. Then we get to the next bar or measure, and we can see that they're all played mezzo forte. And that first note of the last bar or measure is also played mezzo forte, but at that point we've got a crescendo. But how loud do we get towards the end of that bar or measure? Now, you often come across this in music, is that there is no dynamic marking given. It's up to you as the musician to interpret the music. So as you're playing that bar, are you going to go to forte, fortissimo, fortissimo? That's for you to decide, and how it fits in with the other parts. If we remember the oboe part, it's actually playing piano on that very last note, so you're probably not going to want to play ridiculously loud to overpower that oboe. But just be aware that sometimes there is a little bit of freedom for you to decide how loud or soft you play. Before we finish, just an assortment of other dynamics that you might come across. First of all, FP, that means forte piano. And the way you play that is that you play a note, and it's usually a longer note, forte, and then you immediately drop to piano. SF and SFZ mean sforzato and sforzando. Now they both mean roughly the same thing, which is forced, so you give a bit of extra push on a note as you play it. And if you fancy looking for an example of that, have a look at the opening bars of Sibelius Finlandia. It's a great piece, but a very good example of sforzando being used. And finally, we've got SFP, which means sforzando piano, and you'd play a note sforzando, so forced, but then the dynamic immediately drops to piano. Okay, well, I hope that's been useful to you, Matthew, and anybody else that's been watching. Remember, if anybody does have any questions about music theory, please do send me an email or contact me via Facebook or Twitter. I really do look forward to receiving your messages. In the meantime, many thanks for watching, and if you haven't already done so, please do subscribe to my YouTube channel. Okay, well, I hope that's been See you soon. Thing you down.